Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from It's Traffic Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Wednesday, September 10th. The risk disclaimer in front of you, everything that we're going through, of course, in these videos are for information purposes only and education purposes only. Also, this will be the last end of day video for the rest of this week, as I will be doing some traveling. Good day, I think, by the way, to kind of cut a little bit of positions, which I did today. Why did I do that? Well, probably because of a couple different factors. Number one, when I go away, sometimes I have a habit of keeping on a little bit too much risk, and I'm not monitoring as much as I should. And I think that we're getting to the point where we're almost at the halfway point of September. We know that the back half, on average, please don't get mad at me when I say something like this, but on average, we know that the seasonality is not very good for the second half of September. Now, I'm not going to play games with when that day kicks in, but again, this is all about odds, right? We are operating every day in an uncertain environment, there's always uncertainty in the marketplace, and I try to take advantage of when we know some things. And knowing that the second half of September is generally weaker than other times of the year is a pretty good is something um, to basically use in your toolbox, right? It's not to say it's predictive, and it doesn't mean 100% that the second half of September is going to be weak, but we know on average that it is, right? And I think as strong as this market has been over the last few months, where every little dip it gets bought, I probably want to be a little bit more conservative. And I think today is one of those situations too, right? And I think like having a little bit of a sense of sentiment helps a little bit. One of the things I tweeted out earlier, and I put this in the midday Substack today. Let's see if I have that up someplace for you. Sorry, I apologize. I always forget to bring every little thing that I have going on in here. But sure, I guess I can show this. And I think like these are important things to kind of think about for now. Replace. I could just go like this. And this is my midday Substack that I send out for free, by the way. So you could sign up at ttgtrading.substack.com. Of course, if you want to pay $20 a month, which is nothing, I reiterate that because I do think it's well worth your while to see open positions and trade setups as well, and kind of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. But let's stick with the free version. And yeah, so here's what I'm referring to. This is just SPX seasonality. I've showed this before in these videos, but here we are, middle of September. At some point, we have a very good beginning of September. Notice it's again, this is not an S&P chart because it almost resembles what we saw in the beginning of the month where we sold off a little bit and then we begin to kind of climb a bit. So again, I don't know the exact date. It's not important for me because I don't think things line up that closely, but I think for the second half of September, yes, I would not be surprised if we get some weakness, right? And some check back. Here's also what I think. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can measure sentiment. I find it very funny with the AAII survey. They found out like who's actually getting surveyed, and I think it's mostly folks that are above 70 years old, and they're already like allocated to the market. So they're basically giving that they're responding to that survey, and many of them will like almost fully invested still have some fear, right? Again, I'm not making that up. That is something that I believe is true about who is actually getting that particular survey or other surveys too. But I think like this is important when you look, for example, but this is a good way, and this is on stock twits. This is called stock twits sentiment index, and it tries to really measure how much the retail crowd is like mentioning a stock and how much more than usual. And again, there's nothing exact with this stuff. It's just basically having a little bit of a feel. And I know some traders, they always want to quantify like when this sentiment reading gets to 90, then it's super hot. Sometimes you got to have a little bit of market feel and just say, hey, wait a minute. Everybody's doing like, for example, like if you're not using something like this, right? Everybody's doing victory laps this morning in social media, right? Like even if you don't pay that much attention to social media, like, and that's sometimes what you could use it for, is just that a gauge of sentiment. Everybody's doing these victory laps. You know that sentiment is too hot. You don't need some AAII survey that's going to spit out a reading and tell you what it does on a week to week basis. If a million people are showing screen prints of their P&L and all kinds of things like this, you know that things are getting pretty hot, right? It's a little bit of feel, it's a little bit of common sense. So, what do we have from time to time? Well, we can kind of talk about the chart. I want to just go back to the before I go to the chart, I'm just going to go to the performance again, just really quickly, and just so that you can kind of see this. But again, we had a gap up this morning, right? Q's gapped up 0.5%, right? So if you're thinking that you're going to buy every time the market gaps up like this and get more gains after so many names were up 3, 4, 5% to start the day, I think that you want to take a step back and understand what you're trying to do with your trading. If you're not satisfied that a name that you bought yesterday is up 5% when you walk into the day, if that's not satisfying for you, then I think that you need to kind of maybe take a bit of a step back and understand like that's really good gains. But I think where people are faltering a little bit in this market is they think that they're going to chase some of these names that are up that much, right? And I can tell you from experience, like that's not normal to see names up so much. So I think that's where some people, if they're not getting into some of their stocks at the right places and at the right prices, even in this market that's been a raging bull market for the last what 5 months, I think there are some people who are getting a little bit disappointed because they're trying to come in and buy some of these big gap ups, right? And we'll go through some names, and I'll talk about how I traded some of them. But I'll tell you, in my portfolio, I didn't have every name that was up today. I'm holding a couple China names that got really beaten up today. And that's kind of been a situation where you kind of have to manage. And as you could see, like, there was the majority of things that went up today are not your popular names. And I think this is also, right, you don't hear anybody talking about, well, I shouldn't say anybody because that's a really bad generalization. There are folks talking about the gold miners, but you don't see people talking about, even though the gold miners are up, what they're up, I think about like 90% this year, which is again like a huge like a huge number, right? So yeah, year to date, the GDX ETF is up 98%. But you don't see as many screenshots and people doing victory laps at how much the gold miners are up, right? Most people aren't even talking about the gold miners, right? They're very fixated on AI, and I get it. That has been a heck of a trend. The move in Oracle, as I went over yesterday, as we were kind of watching that. It's just that these are unbelievable moves. But you can't, like, in my opinion, chasing some of these moves is where you get caught in this market, right? You've got to be pre-positioned in some of these things, right? And again, like I have a couple examples of, and I'm happy to show these because I'm not perfect, right? With going about entries into some of these names, and some of the names that you feel like you miss the initial move, and then you're getting involved in it in 2 or 3 days. Now you have to ask yourself, do you think that for some of those names that you are getting to a little bit late, do you think that these names have more, where do you think they're going long term? And that might kind of help a little bit. It also, names that are gapping up. Another approach that I use quite a bit is legging into. So anyway, let's get to some of these charts, and I think that will kind of help a little bit. But I do find it such an interesting market because bears are definitely not happy, and I sent out a tweet about this yesterday where people are constantly arguing with the market. Oh, if this happens, why then the market's going to go up anyway. I'll tell you, it's a bull market, right? Sometimes we're going to be in a bear market, but sometimes we're going to be in a bull market too. So you have to understand that that's the environment that we're in, it's where prices are going up, right? So that's the standpoint that I see people are getting aggravated because they don't think anything is going to bring the market down. Trust me, it will. We're not in the back end of September. But I saw people saying like last night, well, it doesn't matter what the PPI report's going to be. Even if the PPI report comes up higher, the market's still going to gain. Well, I'll tell you what, the PPI number came in weaker than expected today, and they revised the previous month down. We didn't have that much of a strong day today. The RSP, the equally weighted ETF was down today. So you have to kind of look at it from both sides. And we know that this has been a rolling bull market. And I think part of the reason why it's been that way is because this market is moving so fast to the upside. So I mentioned gold miners. Sometimes I mention I'll go to a chart, and then I never do in these videos, and I apologize for that. But look at what the gold miners are doing, right? But is there any enthusiasm in this group? Probably from small market participants, but I just don't see that many people that are that enthused about this going up 2% every day for the last 2 months. Or excuse me, for the last month or so, right? But this is a market leader. Now it's also AI stocks, but here's a good example. Right, I've been long this BE, and I even said I think I added this um, towards the end of last week, right? And if you've been watching my videos on a regular basis, I said, "Hey, this is really tough for me to get involved in this name at this point." So what do? Right? If it's gone up this much, you and I've seen a lot of call positioning in this, and that's what kind of got me to say, you know what, get involved in it, even though it's been up a lot. But on a day like this where it's up 14%, like if you're not selling into something like this that's way extended above the 5-day moving average, right? I mean, look, by the way, look at the volume in this, and the volume is occurring after a big run, right? That tells me a little bit of a warning signal. If it's big volume in the beginning where it just starts to break out, that's a different story. But if you're seeing huge volume after a candle like this, and if you're not taking some profits here, then odds are you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. But again, I think people are just they're shooting for the moon, right? Instead of understanding like how things historically or normally work with markets. Because again, this market has been on a big run. But you just take this name, which is an AI related name. Look at how much it's gone up over the last month. Just 1 month, right? You go back or and the stock was trading at 30 bucks. It's doubled in a month. And it's not to say now it is winning contracts and I'm going to like this name for longer than right now, but again, if you're an investor, it's a different if you're a long-term investor, it's a different story. And you know I'm talking about like swing trading, right? And being a trader. But if you're not taking profits on a name that goes up 14%, then odds are you shouldn't complain when next day when the stock opens up and then it sells off 10%, right? And you can't be disappointed with something like that. Right. You could say, hey, well, it's okay. I got into the stock when it was, 35 bucks or something, and I understand it's moving like that. Right. That's the right understanding to have. But to get into something like this, and then it happens to sell off, I think that's where people are getting frustrated. And so I mentioned I'll talk about a couple names. Like this has been a frustrating name. And the only way to not get frustrated in something like this, where it starts and then it stops and it starts and it stops, is to trade it with small size so that you're not getting shaken out and that you're not getting mentally fatigued. Right. That's the way to handle this, is to lower the position size. You can't, in my opinion, put on the same position size with every trade and think that you're gonna have success 100% of the time. It doesn't work that way. So now I'm in it, and I'm not gonna get for now. Like, yeah, it may shake people out, but I've seen this happen this year in many times, and I've gotten shaken out of names, and later it rips. Right? I got shaken out in again, nobody I know no one else has this happen to them on in financial media, but and social media and on Twitter and so forth. But Wolf is a name that I try to position in here, right? And I got stopped out in here, and it went a little bit lower, right? Now probably I had too big of a position size on, but it's where you're putting your stops and your where your entry price is and where your stop is, right? But look at this name go back higher, right? And there's a bunch of names like like this, unfortunately, but it happens. And the best way, and that's why I always say, like, if every trader should work on an improvements. But look at what this name has done. ALAB has been an absolute monster. But you go back in here, this was not an easy stock. And I tried trading this once or twice in here and got stopped out. Right. And the stocks are going to do this. They're going to sometimes frustrate the hell out of you. before they actually get going. And once this thing really got going, it's been much more productive, right? But realize that you're not going to catch every move. And so that's why I'm kind of just sitting in Tesla for now. Now, if it breaks back below here, maybe breaks back below here, then I'll get out of it. But I'm going to just sit with a small position in here. Robinhood. And by the way, some of these names I manage two different accounts. I manage a trading account and I manage a trend portfolio, which is kind of geared towards bigger trends. Hence, I didn't have any Oracle on in my trading portfolio, but I have it in my trend portfolio. Right. And this is something like I don't have any name that's over 3% of the portfolio. And this allows me to sit into earnings. And not every name works like this for me, right? With the stock up 35%, right? I catch the ones that sometimes gap down too, right? Even that are in strong trends. Like I have RBRK on too. Now I only have RBRK in there as 1%, right? But you're going to catch some of these on earnings too, where they do this, right? They fall pretty decently. So this is just how it works. And so I find that in my trend portfolio, when I keep things less than 3%, I'm okay with these with names that are going to gap on earnings, because ultimately, hopefully, if I've selected the stocks correctly, I'm going to have more of the gap ups than movements like this. Right. And by the way, and that's a portfolio it's managed in M1 Finance, and I can't trade out of that intraday. Right. I only use the two windows, 9:30 in the morning and at 3:30. You can't trade that intraday. Maybe I'll change that at some point, but in any event, so I was going to mention Robinhood too. So Robinhood, right? I actually bought some of this. Now I was in this back in here, got stopped out a little bit in my trading account. Again, I have it on in the TTG trend portfolio. I'm going to stick with it long term. And my goal today was I just legged into a little bit of this. You got to start someplace. And if it comes back and it checks back into the top of the value area, that's where I'll hold the position. But I think what they came out with, I listened to the presentation and some of the things that they're going to come out with, I think they're just moving the company in the right direction, right? They're making it more appealing to more people. They already have a big client base of young people, right? They're trying to make it so that those people are going to stay and grow with the company over time, right? And I think that that's pretty powerful. And I think they're doing more things than some of their competitors. Right. And I've gone through this before too, where I've gone back and forth with um, what's the other name that got real popular on social media? I think it was Weeble. And I was asking people, I'm like, okay, I get that it's a trade setup, but it's not going to do the same thing as Robinhood, because they're not coming out with the same things. They're so far behind, right? And when a company is so far behind, just when they start to play a little bit of catch up, like I heard a couple things that this company is rolling out. Like they're like, oh, we're going to get crypto. We're getting crypto trading. Okay, that could move the needle like a very tiny bit, but you're already so far back with 10 other companies that have crypto trading. Right? That's not going to make me gravitate towards Webull, right? That they're catching up with some features that everybody else has. What I think is particularly interesting with Robinhood is not everything. They just announced that they now have short selling, which to me is a big head scratcher. But they are allowing they started to get into betting markets. They started to do the 24-hour trading. Right? That was a little bit ahead of some other people. So that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make, and why I'm not going to trade a Weeble just because people on social media are getting excited about it, thinking that it has a high short interest. Right? It's for me, it's got to have something. It's got to have those fundamental reasons that they're doing something to attract market share, not just doing things to kind of catch up with the rest of the crowd. I hope that makes sense. And again, that's my trading style. It may be different from you. I'm not an influencer who can tell people to get people all excited to all jump into the same stock at the same time to get it to go. It's not really my style. I don't do those types of things. So in any event, a couple other positive stories of the day, and so for financial exposure, I have Robinhood, and I put on Rocket companies. Now, why am I long this company? Right. Well, there's a couple reasons. Right? There's a change that's going on. Bonds are rallying. right? And I'm talking about the long end of the curve. If bonds are rallying, they are going to get more business because most likely, and again, this is making a little bit of a jump to conclusion here, but rates go lower, people are going to refinance, right? And they're probably going to want to do it in one of the cheapest ways possible. So they may go to a rocket mortgage. All right. So that's one particular reason. Number two, right? The chart is looking pretty good, right? It's now has some momentum behind it, right? So that's another reason, right? It's something has changed here, right? We've started to break out of the value area. It's got a nice technical view to it. It's starting to trend. It's been trending now for a couple months where it breaks higher, consolidates, breaks higher a little bit, consolidates, breaks higher. Another reason that I'm in this, there's a 43% short interest. Now, I would never buy a company just because of the short interest. And I think that's the incorrect way to trade. There has to be other factors or other reasons for you to get involved in name. But again, this is my process and may be different from yours. But I would personally, again, I'll say it one more time. I would never buy a company just because of the short interest. There are bad companies out there, and that's why there's a short interest. Right? We've seen that time and time again, where some companies go out of business. Now, is it foolish of the shorts to continue to press something when the company's at $3? Yeah, probably, right? And I think that's the situation with Open Door and a number of other examples. So I'm going to leave because I'm going to be out, not out completely, but not doing end of day videos. I'm going to leave it here, and I'll tell you what I think is particularly good for this market is for it to come in a little bit. Right, it gets some of that super high sediment, right? And we've seen this. We saw this last Friday, right? Where people are getting over the tips of their skis with risk, right? And they're getting hurt where the market's barely even pulling back a little bit. So that's been the case now for a while. Could we get a bigger pullback than that in the end of September? I think that's in the cards, and I think I don't I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it would also be good for this market too to get a little bit more of a pullback and to get people a little bit off sides rather than this super bullish sentiment that we've got right now. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. Hope you had a great day and hope you're trading well and hope you're listening and hope these videos are helpful for you. Please give it a like or retweet. That helps a lot. And this way I know that you're finding these videos and information of value to you, and I will continue to do it. If you don't, if it's not as if you're not providing value with it, that's fine too. And maybe at some point I won't do them anymore. But I like to do these videos because number one, this market is extremely interesting, and if this isn't giving you the way that this market is on a day-to-day basis, right? If you're not finding this interesting or compelling, right, then trading's not for everybody. But for me, like this is just it's so interesting on a day-to-day basis where a company like Oracle comes out and talks about what they're doing for the next few years and the stock goes up 35%. I mean, it's just an amazing market that we have on our hands. So in any event, I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great night and also a great rest of